Welcome back everyone, it's Raleigh and it's time for another regional lore video. Today we're going to be talking about the Shiverpeak Mountains, or more specifically the Central Shiverpeak Mountains. This part of the world is one of my favorites, since ArenaNet captures the feeling of traveling through snowy mountains really well. There are many details here in both the first and second game. Perhaps the most interesting part about the Shiverpeak Mountains is that beside the Jaya Bluffs area in Kantha, it is the only part of the currently available world that has snow, which makes this a rather unique place. As a reminder, there will be spoilers for the first game, and if you haven't watched the intro video to the series, I suggest you do that before moving on. Let's have a deeper look at the Shiverpeak Mountains. The Shiverpeaks are a mountain range that runs north to south through central Tyria, ending close to the Sea of Sorrows. Ascalon lies to the east and Kryta to the west. It is unknown how far the Shiverpeaks continue further north. While one would think these mountains haven't seen a lot of changes, with the awakening of Jormag, the elder dragon of ice and snow, a lot of changes actually did come to these parts of the mountains. Most of the central Shiverpeaks are now inhabited by Norn, but this was not always the case. Until the battle against the Great Destroyer, a champion of yet another elder dragon, that being Primordus, dwarves called these mountains their home, and to that end we can see many of their structures, now in ruins, strewn throughout the mountains. Once the dwarves went to fight Primordus and his forces, abandoning the world above, a few races were pushed south from the far Shiverpeaks in the north, down into the central and southern Shiverpeaks. These races were most prominently the Norn, but also different villages of Quaggan and many of the ice sanctuaries the Codan inhabit. Jormag's awakening also brought floods into the Shiverpeaks, creating an inland sea on which the aforementioned Codan sanctuaries traveled south. Since the Shiverpeaks are a mountainous area, most of the flora here consists of pine trees and plants that survive in harsher climates. The fauna is made up of wolves, bears, deer, on top of worms and ice imps, among many others. The largest enemy factions around are the Sons of Svanir, who follow Jormag as the spirit totem of Dragon, Icebrood, minions of Jormag, which sometimes are transformed Sons of Svanir, as well as Dredge, who after their dwarven slave masters had left the picture, are rising to take back the mountains for themselves. You will come across the occasional tribe of Grawl or Centaurs sometimes as well. While the Shiverpeak Mountains might not have as in-depth of history as Ascalon does, there are still some important events that have impacted the region and Tyria as a whole. Let's take a look at a timeline of events. As mentioned earlier, the Shiverpeaks were once the home of the dwarves. The dwarves, being one of the elder races, have existed for over 10,000 years and were present during the last rising of the elder dragons. Legends state that the Great Dwarf, their patron god, created the dwarves atop Anvil Rock, one of the tallest mountains of the Shiverpeaks, which is in the shape of an anvil. In the year 534 AE, a hero named Lornar single-handedly fought off a hill giant's invasion at Beacon's Perch, a smaller outpost leading down into Kryta. The Lornar's Pass was named after him. In the year 1072 AE, Prince Rurik, alongside the heroes of Guild Wars 1 and refugees from Ascalon, crossed the Shiverpeak Mountains to seek refuge in Kryta. However, they stumbled into the middle of a civil war between the Deldrimor and Stone Summit dwarves, the two factions the dwarves split into at some point, and had to ally with the Deldrimor to cross safely into Kryta. In order to do this, Prince Rurik met with the king of the dwarfs, Jalis Ironhammer, who was more than happy to assist the young prince and his entourage. While most of the group managed to escape the mountains, Prince Rurik laid down his life to protect his subjects at the Frostgate. He was killed by Dagnar Stonepate, the leader of the Stone Summit dwarves. At some point shortly after, the heroes returned to the central Shiverpeaks to assist the Deldrimor dwarves in their struggle. The Stone Summit had taken over Sorrow's Furnace, the largest mine in the mountains situated on the very south side of the central Shiverpeaks. Here, the heroes led multiple incursions into the mine to thwart the slave-driving Stone Summit. One of these missions involved retrieving the Tome of the Rubicon, which is an ancient text purportedly written by the Great Dwarf himself that contains the name of both the Great Dwarf and the Great Destroyer, the antithesis of the Great Dwarf and Primordus' greatest champion. The heroes would return to Dwarven lands once again and help the Deldrimor dwarves defeat the Stone Summit leader, Dagnar, at the Battle for Thunderhead Keep, the capital of the dwarves. After the defeat of the Stone Summit, the Dredge, who had been enslaved by the Stone Summit and now having been freed, formed the Moletariat and reclaimed Sorrow's Furnace as their home, renaming it Sorrow's Embrace. In 1078 AE, the prophecies of the Tome of the Rubicon came to pass, when earthquakes shook the world and the destroyers, minions of the elder dragon Primordus, surfaced. This caused the dwarves to unite in a ritual invoked by King Jalis Ironhammer that transformed them into stone warriors so that they could go into the depths of Tyria and fight off the destroyers to prevent Primordus from awakening. Once the dwarves ventured into the depths, the dredge emerged from Sorrow's embrace and started claiming all the dwarven lands for themselves, spreading out across the Shiverpeaks, destroying anything and everything dwarven as revenge for their enslavement. In the year 1105 AE, Dermond, a Crichton historian, left Lion's Arch and established the Dermond Priory, built its headquarters within a tall mountain in Lornar's Pass, and began storing all kinds of artifacts and other knowledge within its halls. Then in 1169 AE, the elder dragon Jormag awakened in the far Shiverpeaks, causing a huge blizzard while attacking the Norn and Coden that lived in the region, forcing the Norn to migrate south to the central Shiverpeaks and establish Holbrak. Initially, Holbrak was the personal hunting lodge of Asgir Dragonrender, a hero among the Norn, and the only person known to have fought Jormag and survived while severing one of its fangs from its maw. After the battle with Jormag, in which the spirit of Owl was completely destroyed, Asgir led his people south with the guidance of the other spirits of the wild. Driving back the dredge that had taken over most of the dwarven lands, the mighty Norn eventually settled in the center of the Shiverpeaks. Holbrak started to grow with new sanctuaries having been built in honor of the spirits. Over time, a fanatical cult called the Sons of Svanir arose, who pledged themselves to the Ice Dragon and started worshipping it as the spirit of dragon. Jormag's awakening also created earthquakes and brought water from the northern seas to flood into the Shiverpeaks. Within the next 2 centuries, as the Coden and Quaggan fled the Elder Dragon, they ventured along this inland sea toward the central Shiverpeaks in search of a peaceful place to call their new home. This brings us to the current state of the central Shiverpeaks. While the Sons of Svanir are growing in popularity and are trying to bring as many Norn as possible to their side, the Dredge are desperately defending themselves and their claimed lands from anyone and everyone. Holbrak has grown significantly and has become a major hub for merchants and hunters alike. On the northern side of the Shiverpeaks, where the new inland sea is, a powerful champion of Jormag, called the Claw of Jormag, and its ice-brewed minions terrorize the region. On your journey through the Shiverpeaks, you will come across many Quaggan and Coden refugees that are heading south to safety, Dredge and Sons of Svanir that are waiting for a piece of your mind, and even Priory scholars that are trying to find ancient knowledge and treasures to help combat the Elder Dragons. Let's look at what maps entail the central Shiverpeaks. We begin in the center with Holbrak. While Norn don't have armies and usually don't gather in large crowds, Holbrak has become the social center for the Norn race. The main features of Holbrak are its Great Lodge, where the tooth that Asgir rendered is kept, and the 4 lodges dedicated to the greater spirits of the wild, those being Bear, Raven, Snow Leopard, and Wolf. Venturing east out of Holbrak, you will get to the Wayfarer Foothills. Situated between Holbrak and the Black Citadel, the foothills serve as a starting point for new Norn adventurers. Many Norn tried to start the legends here. The most southern part of the foothills is a tundra-like valley with 4 shrines to the greater spirits. Going north, you come across many homesteads and Norn living their everyday lives, disrupted by some Sons of Svanir and Dredge. A powerful Svanir shaman is wreaking havoc on a frozen lake, and the northernmost area is home to one of the largest Svanir settlements. To the west lie the Snowden Drifts. This is where players are introduced to the first Coden and Quaggan refugees needing help in settling in their new homes, while some are still trying to find their place. The destroyed Abattoir of Owl lies to the southeast, and many homesteads of Norn are strewn about the area. Once again, Svanir make life here fairly difficult, and eagle-eyed players will spot a Claw of Jormag aiding the Svanir in their efforts. Parts of the central area are occupied by Jotun, an ancient but regressed race of lesser giants. Even centaurs are attacking the Norn on the western side. A priory stronghold sits to the very northwest, and southwest sports the Bodega Stedding with some inaccessible hot springs, and nearby Dredge continually attack the area. South of the Drifts is Lornar's Pass. This area stretches very far south, with the southern part being further down the mountains and snow giving way to more greenery. The biggest attraction here is the large mountain that serves as the headquarters for the Dermond Priory. Many caves and mines with dredge and scrid can be found here, as well as mysterious steam creatures on a frozen lake. The southwestern area has a lake with pirates fighting for control over an island base, and even Jotun make their presence known to the southeast. Next up are the Dredgehan Cliffs, and as the name implies, this area sports the largest dredge presence in all of the Shiverpeaks. In the very south of this map you will find Sorrow's Embrace, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the dungeon the dredge use as their original base of operations. The area is littered with ancient dwarven mines having been taken over by the dredge. The very center of the map has one of the largest dredge operations besides Sorrow's Furnace. The lake to the northwest as well as the northeast area is swarming with Sons of Svanir, and in the east you will find the ruins of the Granite Citadel, which was a solitary outpost of the dwarves during the time of the original game. The last Central Shiverpeaks map I will mention today is Frostgorge Sound. It lies north of the Waitfarer foothills and is one of the highest level areas of the core game. The southern area of the map has a lot of Svanir activity with a huge base of operations. A Grawl tribe worshipping dragons sits to the southeast. Venturing north, you come across new settlements of Khodan refugees and a big camp that acts as a staging ground for soldiers fighting a strong champion of Jormag. The western side is flooded with waters from the north and has many Quaggan villages and Khodan sanctuaries fighting against countless Icebrood and Svanir attacks. The biggest spectacle here is in the very center in the north, where soldiers are fighting the aforementioned champion, the Claw of Jormag, in order to safeguard the more southern regions from its destructive power. That wraps up today's intro to the Shiverpeaks lore. There are some areas I've left out, but you will have to discover those as you adventure through the game and story. While the Norns seem rather brutish, there is a lot of depth to their culture, and as you progress through the story, older content like the Central Shiverpeaks start to take on a deeper meaning in the larger scale of the world of Tyria. Thank you for hanging out and watching a sneak peek into the Shiverpeaks. I hope you enjoyed it and will stick around for the rest. I will see you all next time. Bye guys.